Good morning and welcome to Morning Movie News, where yesterday the Disney studio proved they don't need Marvel to make headlines. And with their entire portfolio, including Marvel, they're able to still dominate today's entire episode of Morning Movie News. Are any other studios making movies? It often doesn't seem like they are. All right, so let's start out with the first story of the day, and that's, of course, the new title for the Star Wars film, The Force Awakens. And it was very interesting the way that Disney and Lucasfilm revealed this information. At around, I'd say, 1 o'clock, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time yesterday, I got an email from the Disney press office saying, go to StarWars.com or the Star Wars Facebook page for breaking news. And I was like, oh my gosh, what is this? Do I need to make a video now? So I hopped over to StarWars.com and I saw this announcement that said, Principal Photography has finished on Star Wars. And I saw like a little logo for the movie, and I was like, oh, well, we already knew that Principal Photography had ended. Where's the news? Why would they send me here without having it already posted? So I was like, well, maybe it's on the Facebook page. So I went over to the Facebook page, and I saw that they had the same announcement there. But then, thank goodness, I saw the comments, and people were commenting on the title, which had been hidden within the words Star and Wars. And I was like, oh, that's the big news, the title of the movie. So to me, it was a little bit of a non-event because I think that this, like many of the Star Wars announcements, for some reason just wasn't as exciting maybe as Disney had intended. It turned out to be a very big attention getter, though, online, as I think for 2 days, because this morning as well, The Force Awakens was still trending. So I think people are intrigued, particularly Star Wars fans, and then of course you have the media who are pushing the story as much as possible to see what kind of traction that it has. And I think, as I've discussed many times before on this show, I don't see a lot of traction so far with Star Wars, and I think we're waiting for that big announcement that will get it the traction that it really needs. Because so far it hasn't been able to really compete with the comic book movies in terms of getting the audience and the media attention. So The Force Awakens. I think that it's interesting to think about, well, did the Force go to sleep? Like there's that element of it. Can the Force ever really go away? Well, I guess that's the argument that might be made here. Then also it kind of, I think, alludes to the how old the franchise is. Like maybe it's awakening. There's like a nod to that as well. And some of the characters are going to be older, like our principal, cast members from the original trilogy. And I do often say that these days Harrison Ford looks like he just woke up from a nap. So I guess that could play into it as well. But I think that the title of The Force Awakens isn't as good as something like that I think really obviously refers to something like a story point. Like I think The Empire Strikes Back was really good. I guess this is more a little bit like The Return of the Jedi, something like that. I would think the only thing that could really get somebody's attention and get the kind of buzz that maybe they would like a comic book movie, think about The Age of Ultron. That actually refers to a character. So it would be great to see like Darth Vader's legacy or the Skywalker legacy. That would be very interesting because the Skywalkers are obviously a very important family. Or the fate of Han Solo, or Boba Fett, something like that. Something that referred to characters and what they might be doing. I think that would have maybe a little bit of a better title. Actually, more than I think about it, I really like the Skywalker legacy because I think the Skywalker is obviously such a great name. But I'm curious to what you think of The Force Awakens as a title. Do you think people are talking about it just because we finally have a title for the new Star Wars movie? Or do you think it's genuinely exciting in its own right? And what do you think it means? Do you think that it means the Force has gone to sleep? And do you think the Force can really disappear? Isn't it supposed to be this constant thing? Although I guess it's kind of a little bit of a sleep in the beginning of the first movie, The Phantom Menace, when they did that whole, like, it's in your blood kind of thing, like a mitochondrians or something, the more scientific approach to the Force. But we'll see. And also, if it's a scientific thing, well, then it can't really awaken, can it? That's really focusing on the spirituality of the Force, which I think is something that fans like to, argue about. Is it a spiritual thing or a scientific thing? We'll see. We'll see. Everyone's definitely going to want to watch The Force Awakens, but the question will be, will it awaken the fan base and the franchise in general, which has to win over new fans? All right, so that's the first story of the day, and the second story of the day, also from Disney, is about another franchise returning after a long nap, but not as long as people might have thought. And that's, of course, Toy Story, which was announced yesterday. It's returning for Toy Story 4. There are a couple of different not cast. And that's the thing. I don't know why everybody acted like it was such a surprise when they said this, because we've known for some time that the principal cast members, especially Tom Hanks and Tim Allen, are signed on for a fourth entry already. So we knew that they were likely going to make it. And I think the only people who might have been surprised were the people at Pixar, or at least maybe this is what they were trying to sell us on, because they didn't think the suits would actually make them do it. But they claim they have a really good idea, and it is from the minds of the original Pixar, brain trust, who, of course, did the very first Toy Story, Pixar's very first film. So this is going to come out in 2017. John Lasseter is going to direct. Again, he did the first two. And I did like when they did the announcement, they released a behind-the-scenes photo of John Lasseter standing with some of his animators, holding like a little meeting. And I thought that was really nice because it reminded me of, I'm sure it's a great, big, important meeting. I don't want to trivialize it, but having a small meeting. And then also it reminded me of when they did the Star Wars casting announcement, they had the photo of the first, like table read, or, just the reading of the script. And I think these behind-the-scenes photos are really nice because it reminds you that, of the talent behind the camera that's so responsible for these projects coming together. One of my pet peeves about Hollywood for a very long time is I think it focuses way too much on the on-camera talent, which is, of course, a vital part of the movie-making business, but certainly not the whole thing. And I think that it discourages different kinds of diverse careers and somehow creates the idea that if you're in the movie business but you're not in front of the camera, somehow it's not as exciting or as important. And I think that's really wrong, especially when you look at the changes that are happening, thank goodness, with Christopher Nolan and all the attention he's getting for Interstellar. And then I just recently saw a wonderful stage play here in the city, New York City, about Billy Wilder and Raymond Chandler writing Double Indemnity. And that was really a wonderful play, and I thought it was great to focus on that side of the movie. And of course the people who made it happen. And a really interesting story working against the production code and all those things. Just really, really good. So I love showing the behind the scenes stuff that's going on. And I think that's great that Disney's made the announcements with behind the scenes photos. So John Lasseter will direct again. You can question whether or not John Lasseter is still super talented, because I think he's made some questionable choices as the head of Disney Animation. Maybe he's a director at heart, a storyteller, and not a production executive. I don't know to this day if he was the best choice to head Disney Animation when they combined the two, when they acquired Pixar. But so far they've picked him. So maybe somebody else will take over while he's busy doing this, and they might be better at the job. So John Lasseter will direct. Then they're having different writers, though. They're bringing in the team that wrote Celeste and Jesse Forever, which didn't really make a lot of, a big impression on the media or audiences. So I guess someone at Pixar really liked it. But interestingly, half of that writing team is Rashida Jones from Parks and Recreation. She's, done a lot of, some small movie work. I think she, she's worked with Paul Rudd a lot. She's kind of like on the fringe of the Judd Apatow group. But anyway, and she's Quincy Jones's daughter. So I think considering that she's an actress, and a somewhat well-known actress, I wouldn't be surprised if she gets to also voice a character in the movie. Her writing partner, Will McCormack, is also something of an actor, but I think it's more something that he would like to be, and he's more of a writing expertise. It's not the guy from Will and Grace, it's somebody else, and I don't think he'll get to do a voice. But I think Rashida Jones very much likely will find herself voicing some character in the movie. I just want to see more Barbie and Ken in the film, especially Ken. I mean, he was my favorite part of Toy Story 3. But then also, the producer of the film will be Galen Sussman, who produces the shorts, the Toy Story shorts, Toy Story of Terror, and also Toy Story That Time Forgot, which is coming out this year for the holidays. Now, interestingly, I have a friend who's really into like kids animation and family animation, all ages stuff, and she doesn't want to watch Toy Story of Terror again. Or she didn't want to watch it again this year after having seen it last year because she said it just wasn't as good as the movie. So I think that is a troubling sign. She watches every holiday special every year, and I was really surprised when I was like, hey, are you watching Toy Story of Terror this year? And she's like, no, I'm going to skip it. And I was like, what? So I'm curious if you think the shorts are as good as the films, and do you think you would bring over any of that talent to the movies? Now, we'll talk about Toy Story 4 in a minute and whether or not it should exist, but something else that's very interesting about this is that it's got a very competitive release date. Toy Story 4 is set for June 16th, 2017, and it's a fighting date when you hear what's around it, okay? The week before How to Train Your Dragon 3 is supposed to hit theaters. Then 2 weeks later, Despicable Me 3. So it's sequel, not only is it sequel city, But Toy Story, I think, is maybe trying to take out some of the competition, or Pixar is trying to take out the competition, and Toy Story 4 is the weapon, that franchise. And I'm just curious to how you think Toy Story will be as a competitor against those other franchises, which are quite beloved in their own right, and especially considering so many people feel that maybe Toy Story 4 shouldn't exist. Maybe it's a step too far, because trilogies, well, you know, this is a big change in Hollywood. It used to be you made a trilogy, and once you made a trilogy, you were done. But comic book movies have changed that, and Harry Potter also as well. So people don't rely so much on trilogies anymore. Trilogies are no longer the end of a franchise. They're expected to go on forever. So you can understand why maybe the suits at Disney would feel that Toy Story should be the same way. So I'm curious to what you think of that. How do you feel about Toy Story 4? And also, what would be your primary thing to see in the month of June? Will you see all of them? I mean, you're going to have comic book movies coming out at the same time. That's a very busy movie season. It's the summer. And you have 3 animated films in 1 month, with just a span of a few weeks. And they're all really huge juggernauts. The Despicable Me franchise is huge, obviously. Everybody loves How to Train Your Dragon. This is supposed to be the final entry for that. They've said they're not going to go beyond 3 for How to Train Your Dragon. So that will be an end story. And, you know, Pixar is obviously trying to cut it off at the legs by coming out the very next week with Toy Story 4. So some people have said, do you think they should have made Toy Story 4? And wasn't 3 supposed to be the end? Well, I have to tell you that Pixar films are a little tough for me. And I've said before that I feel Pixar is emotionally manipulative. They know what buttons to push to get you to get a certain reaction. And while at first I thought it was really, you know, made in sophisticated, you know, stories, I've come to feel manipulated, like my strings are being pulled. And as Ultron said, there are no strings on me. Don't manipulate me, Pixar, and make me cry in a movie theater. You know, you have to actually earn that. And I think that Pixar goes for shortcuts. So I don't like being manipulated, and I feel that it shows, you know, a lack of, you know, storytelling skill. And also, it shows goals that are not the same as just telling a great story. It makes me feel that, you know, they sit in a room, and instead of saying, what can we do that will really tell a wonderful story for the next chapter of Toy Story, the first thing they say is, okay, how can we make everybody cry? And I mean, I thought, like, for instance, the incinerator scene in Toy Story 3 was just too much. It didn't belong in a children's movie. I've argued this point with many of you, but I still feel very strongly that it was a mistake, inappropriate. I don't think a Holocaust reference or a 9/11 reference, I felt it was really, you know, echoed both of those horrible, horrible real-life instances, belonged in a family movie with toys in it. I just didn't think the movie needed to go there, and I think it went there solely for the purpose of making you cry. I think it didn't serve the story at all. What that scene achieved could have been achieved many other ways. So I'm very scared for what Toy Story 4 will be. What horrible things are they going to make the toys befall the toys so that they can make us cry? But again, if it had more Ken, I would probably be pretty excited about it. So I'm curious to what you think of Toy Story 4, about how it's facing off against the competition, that Pixar is not done with sequels. They have some original films coming up, but they're still going to be a bit of a sequel factory, which every studio in Hollywood is doing these days, and that they're not putting Toy Story to rest. You know, they never even wanted to make a sequel in the first place, Toy Story 2, but, you know, Disney bought the Disney threatened to make it without them because of their rights, and that led to the purchase of Pixar because Pixar realized that Disney had them. Disney had them locked down, and they had no choice. They could not escape. I guess maybe they felt like they were in the incinerator. And now they're part of the Disney Corporation, and now they're making a 4th Toy Story. All right, so write your thoughts down below. Let's go over to the 3rd story of the day, also about Disney Marvel. And this is a legal situation that's developing out of Marvel Studios, and that's they want the name or identity. They have a name, but they don't believe, obviously, it's the real name of whoever leaked that Avengers Age of Ultron trailer a week early. Now, this story was sent to me by Cody Shelton, but Marcus Luera also sent me on Facebook a lead on this. I appreciate when you guys send me stories, especially when they're not quite at the top of the pack in terms of what's getting attention. So they thought this was a great little story. And maybe it'll grow into a big story. Because, you know, you might recall we discussed the Lionsgate going after whoever leaked the Expendables 3 entire film earlier this year, and we never really saw how that case materialized, and it really faded away from the headlines. But they were very aggressive last time we checked. And Marvel is being very aggressive, surprisingly aggressive. Wait till you hear this. It sounds like something out of one of their own movies. So apparently on October 22nd, they reached out to Google themselves in a friendly way and said, we would really like you to pull down the trailer, and we would like all the information about user John Gazelle, and his IP address, so that we can track him down. Because we suspect that he works for us or works for a company that we subcontracted to work on the trailer. And not only do we want him fired, but we want to pursue, obviously, I would assume, legal action. But Google did not comply because Google is obviously very protective. I mean, look, just ask Jennifer Lawrence, who wants to get those nude photos of herself down. She's also had to take legal action against Google to take those down. So far, we haven't heard anything about the results of that. So the judge granted Marvel a subpoena to get the information from Google, but Marvel had also asked to go into the Google offices themselves and to get this information, which I think is amazing. To actually ask to enter another company and to access their databases manually is just an incredible request. And I'm not surprised that the judge didn't grant it. But the judge has said that Google must supply Marvel with the IP address for user John Gazelle so that they can find out more about his whereabouts and his identity. Because it's a serious thing to leak a trailer. I mean, Marvel got on it very quickly. They released it just hours later themselves officially, and I think they've gotten the bulk of the views. So, but still, it really hurt their Avengers Age of, their Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., what they want to do to build up audience for that, get it some more attention. And it also required them to release that scene that they weren't planning on releasing, to give something extra to Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. when they decided to air that. And since they'd already aired that scene at some Comic-Cons, it wasn't as exciting as the actual trailer. So, and also, you want to control the way you release your own information, right? You don't want somebody else to go rogue and do it online. And to what purpose? Was it just anarchy, or was that person hoping to make money off of airing the trailer? Very interesting situation. We'll see what Google does. The internet has long been a wild place that's very much like the Wild West, but as it becomes more populated, especially with rich men, which are the studios in this metaphor, they want law and order, and we'll see if they eventually begin to get it. I don't want the internet to totally go away from what it is, but I do believe that Marvel has a case here to whoever leaked it's their property, and they have the right to release it however they see fit. All right, so let's move on to the viewer question, which also has to do with Disney, and this is from Musical Cat, also known as Mary, and Mary says, "Hi Grace. Question. I can't remember if you've covered this subject already, so just disregard this question if you have. I have not, so let's discuss your question." So Mary asks, on the last episode of Movie Fights on the Screen Junkies channel, it was discussed about how they might be trying to get Captain America the Winter Soldier nominated for a Best Picture Oscar. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think it deserves to be nominated? If not for Best Picture, then in what other categories? I'd love to hear everyone else's opinion too. Thanks, Mary. So this is great. So everybody, please write your thoughts down below on this. Obviously, I haven't watched that episode of Screen Junkies, so I don't know where they got their information from. That sounds to me like a rumor. I think Disney has a lot on their plate, and I think it's very unlikely they would push Captain America the Winter Soldier for any of the major categories. Maybe for like a special effects, but I think Guardians of the Galaxy has much better special effects because it's just a more impressive setting. It takes place in space. They have all the makeup. Surely they think maybe they can get a makeup or costume nomination. And also Disney, because they have so many movies in their stable now and so many brands, they have a lot to shop. So I think Into the Woods is obviously, because especially Rob Marshall's history with the Academy of Chicago, who's a big Oscar winner, I think they're going to push Into the Woods. And obviously that has a very awards-friendly release date as well. I think Captain America the Winter Soldier, well, I think a very good film and an excellent political thriller. I really, really liked what it had to say about America and police state and all those different things and surveillance, the real discussions we're having right now. I think that the movie didn't have the strong social message or the strong social overtones that something like The Dark Knight did. It also didn't have any performances like Heath Ledger's, which were really something extraordinary, something that was groundbreaking and truly special. It's just not, I think that Captain America the Winter Soldier, while very good and a huge step forward for comic book movies in general, wasn't of the caliber of an Oscar not even nominated film. And I think that Disney surely recognizes that, because you would have started to have seen some buzz for that. They'd be holding screenings. Also, it was beat at the box office by Guardians of the Galaxy. It's no longer the big Marvel movie of the year. So without that wind in its sails, it's hard to promote it. I think when they promote a Marvel movie to the Academy, which of course, as you know, is comprised mostly of older voters, they're going to be like, well, what's about that Guardians of the Galaxy movie everybody was talking about? I mean, I think a lot of the Academy voters, and this is why it's so hard to get a comic book movie nominated, don't really follow that part of the industry, and they're probably a little resistant to it. So I think they only know what they hear. It's kind of like the problem that animation has. They don't follow animation. So that's why the movie that did the best at the box office usually wins or comes from the most prestigious brand. Disney, Pixar have really like an advantage because, I think often just like sometimes when people vote in real life, they vote by party instead of candidate. And so I think that with Marvel, the candidate this year is Guardians of the Galaxy. And that's just, it's a cold hard fact that The Winter Soldier, while I feel is a superior film, it was beaten at the box office and beaten in terms of the court of public opinion, and so you got to go with Guardians of the Galaxy. So if I were Disney Marvel, if I had to push any movie for nominations, that would be the one. Now, can any Marvel movie in the future get a nomination? I don't know. I feel that when you focus more on the interconnectedness of the movies, it's hard to have these really resounding character arcs that make for Oscar-worthy performances and story arcs. Because I don't know. Maybe Game of Thrones is able to do it, right? Maybe if I were Kevin Feige, I'd try and see why that works so well. And I think it's because they raise the stakes a little bit higher. So far, the stakes in the Marvel Cinematic Universe haven't been very high, and I think it's because they have a lack of strong villains. The Lannisters are a wonderful set of villains and very charismatic, but they do real evil, and I think we haven't seen any real villains coming about. So I think that Ultron could be a really big game changer for the Marvel Cinematic Universe if he's truly evil, truly irredeemable, unless they're just like, oh, he has a programming glitch, now he's lovely, and he likes to skip through the field. Which, don't put that past Marvel. Their movies tend to be a little happier than DC. And so I think DC is actually better suited in the way they have their tone for their films for Oscar-winning material. Although Zack Snyder's now in charge of that with David Goyer, and they're not an Oscar-worthy team. They have to get some directors in there who are, more savvy and not only what makes a movie Academy Award worthy, but can play that game politically. And that's another problem with, Joss Whedon's group of friends that are taking over, James Gunn, Scott Derrickson. They're not Academy people. They're not good at campaigning with the Academy. They don't talk the talk or walk the walk. And it's a political game to win Oscars. And Christopher Nolan is genius at it, and he cultivates that image that can make Academy voters feel good about voting for his more commercial and mainstream and scientific sci-fi films. That's why I think he succeeds. And Alfonso Cuarón is also very good at it. That's why he did such a great job with Gravity in terms of doing the political aspects of getting a nomination. So they should think of getting a talent like that to work on one of these comic book movies, just like they did with Christopher Nolan, if they want to be back in the running for an Oscar the way The Dark Knight was. All right, so that's my answer to your question, Mary. Thank you so much for asking. I'm curious to see what everybody else will write down below. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please write down below what you think of today's top 3 stories and the viewer question, anything you'd like to see covered on Monday, and any questions that you might have. Thanks for watching. Bye.